first of all, the title, of course, Golden Years on a Green Planet is a real challenging one, I think. And I think our panel will really have some time to go into these different, the golden years part. Is it golden years? And I think it was tongue-in-cheek, of course, because pensions have been a real challenge. Far back, I would say about 15 years ago, at CFA Institute, we used to have these global challenges, and we would sound out our charter holders what they saw as the big challenges, and pensions always came up as a time bomb, but also an opportunity, and we're still there. So the golden years, I think, is really a point where we need to see that we truly connect pensions to what the pension holders really want and need. And that, to my mind, was in a very interesting comment from a blueprint that CFA Institute has recently published on the forthcoming legislative period, in which we discuss, amongst others, pensions. And that came from the Netherlands, and I have Alwin Oerlemans sitting here from CFA Society Netherlands. But it was really the question that we need to be holistic. And that is a comment, of course, that has come throughout the years, talking to MEPs, talking to stakeholders, is that capital markets need to be holistic. They need to encompass the view that it's not just transactional, but that financial markets, to be truly effective, and that incorporates pension, you need to accompany the life cycle of the people for whom these markets are. And that life cycle includes buying a house, it includes financing, it includes investing for special projects, and it includes your later life in pensions. So that part of the golden years is very important. And then to the green part, this is such a huge challenge, and the new commission will have really a challenge to build that into the capital markets, because it's very easy to say, oh, we're green, and so we nibble a little bit at the return to the final investor. Is that what we really want? How do we see this building that green planet, encompassing it into the financial markets with the challenges of literacy for the investors, but also of returns? And that is really one of the big issues. So now, I mean, you know all the people, I would think, almost on the panel, but let me introduce them. Tilman Lueder, of course, is newly named head of Insurance and Pensions Unit. But Tilman, you have a long career in many different units, so you have also a very technical approach to the files, and I hope you'll bring that into this. Alwin Oerlemans, who I said is head of product management at APG Asset Management, but also for his sins, he is a volunteer in CFA Society Netherlands on advocacy, and a specialist on, of course, the whole pensions topic. Fausto Parente, who I really don't need to introduce, but I will, of course, who is Executive Director of the European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority. And I will be looking to him for really some alternative blue sky thinking that I hope he will develop with us, and speak frankly about where he hopes the future will be coming from. And last but not least, Šebo, who is a senior researcher at Matej University, Faculty of Economics, and Chief Research Officer at Orange Envelope, an economist of the Slovak Republic. And of course, representing the stakeholders and really bringing that point of view in. So when I was preparing for the panel, and again, coming back to the title, is saying, you know, we are at a crossroads with financial markets. We are ending that period when everything was purely transactional. But we're still finding our way as to how to build that from transactional to a far longer term perspective, to truly engaging not just with the institutional investor, but also with the retail investor, and truly making it the financial markets function for the economy. That's a huge challenge. And I think that the fact that trust has come back is an encouraging sign. So CFA Institute does biannual trust studies. And I remember when I came on board at CFA Institute was just after the financial and economic crisis. And honestly, the trust of investors was below advertising. So, in financial markets, and that says a lot. So, to think that people would not trust their financial advisor and they think it's below advertising, that's worrying, because who do they turn to when we know that financial literacy was at the lowest? So it's not surprising that everything was stuck into a deposit. What do you do? Where do you go? So that point that Jan mentioned, and I thought that was really important in your overview, and first of all, you said, why am I here? But, it's key. The Savings and Investment Union, and by the way, Jan, I think your title has to change, no longer Capital Markets Union. It should change. So savings and investment, and that is that reconnection, and truly bringing that value for that retail investor. So the trust should not be misplaced. There should be an increasing dialogue. Also, what I think is important, and something that is a challenge, of course, is that this Savings and Investment Union is actually composed of about 4 different generations of investors. And that is a challenge, because you have to think of the baby boomers whose pension is very near, but you're also thinking of the younger generations, Z and X, who are at the very start. So should we encourage them into savings for their pension? Do they see that faraway future? How do we connect them with it? You spoke about the savings account. Well, that's, we need to direct that to those younger generations, because we know the challenges and the finiteness of the public pension system. So we do need to connect those younger generations. But the messaging is quite different between generations. Don't talk to baby boomers the same way you talk to Generation Z. Also, frankly, technology can help in this, artificial intelligence. We see that investors are trusting technology. So let's build on that. I know that the European Commission has been working a lot on AI, on the whole digital agenda. And I think that's very important for pensions as well. Quite honestly, having a tool, and I did an exercise recently, I don't know how many of you do that in your member states, countries, but My Pension BE is actually a pretty useful tool for figuring out what you're getting in retirement. And I had a shock, not a good one. Because I'm one of these people who've worked in 6 different European countries, and I have pensions lying around in all these countries, and I'm going to try and get them all to come to where I need it to. So I hope that we'll also be discussing on some of those issues. But now let's go to the first point. And Fausto, I said I would draw you out into the blue sky and the thinking of the possibilities of the future. So what role could pension policy have to encourage EU citizens to invest their savings in the EU capital markets? That's the 1 penny or 1 million.
Thanks,
right?
thanks a lot, Josina. Thanks all for the kind invitation. I hope that I can, yeah. Thanks a lot for the kind invitation. It's such a, by the way, a lovely place to stay and to talk and share ideas with you. I mean, for me, the first point to make is, and I'm happy that Jan already mentioned it, is that we need, yes, policy on pension to encourage retail investment in the capital, channeling retail investment in the capital. But what is also important is that we need a supplementary pension to really help people to cope with their retirement. So it's important that you mention good return. It's important that you mention this uptake challenge, because nowadays we know the situation is quite clear. We don't have enough in the second and third pillar. Only 20% of people have an occupational pension, 18% of people have a personal pension product. So this means that in a period where the state cannot help any longer, and we have seen the recent commission paper on the pension adequacy, where the replacement rate is dropping down from 45 in 2022 to 38 in 2070, sorry. But already now, 45%. Can you imagine the month after you leave your work, your income drops more than a half? It's something that is simply we need to cope with. We need to understand how to help ourselves for living longer and for living also healthier and happy. So the supplementary, the second and third pillar are quite important, quite key. It was also mentioned by Alessandra, the gender gap in this sense. We are quite aware the risk of poverty in the retirement age is quite higher for women than for men. So we need also diversified response, as you said. I'm scared a bit about the younger, not because I am a boomer, but when I hear young people investing in crypto, let's pay attention because the return should be there. I think it's simply, we need to instruct people that it's not enough saving for retirement. You need to save in the right product where there is a life cycle investment strategy, where there are a bit of guarantee. And now I'm sounding a bit the personal pension product that was developed some time ago, and Alexandra already mentioned it. So we need also good product on the market. We need simply product that's really help also for the decumulation phase. Otherwise, the tendency of people would be to take back when they stop the accumulation phase. And on the contrary, they need money for a life which we hope will be longer and longer. So what we need in synthesis are basically three things. So first, raise awareness. And in here, we would like to have simply what we call the pension tracking system, an app that people can see, a citizen can see, the projection of what they can gain during the retirement period. This is something that we already provided the Commission with an advice time ago. There should be a bit of political push to put this in place for all citizens. It's already developed in some country, but not in each and every country. So this is one thing, raising awareness, pension tracking system, also a pension dashboard for the government, for the policymaker to have a full understanding on where they are investing between the three pillars, because sometimes we see that they incentivize investment in one pillar at the expenses of the other. What we need is a coherent strategy for the three, and this is something that can help. What we also need is more take up, as was mentioned by Jan as well. So here we have some country where the auto-enrollment is already in place. Sometimes it's mandatory, sometimes it's incentivized. In any case, we need strategies that are consistent across the different countries to encourage people to take up their pension thinking and needs. And then, as I already said, we need the third good product on the market. Sometimes we simply don't have a product that offer value for money for the long period, simply. And this is not possible. On this, let me say that I'm proud of the work that we have been doing already since a while on this area of value for money. The effort are, believe me, quite high, even though sometimes it's not so visible from people, because we try to intervene on specific products to talk with the provider and get rid of the product, eliminate the product from the market, where, for example, there is in no scenario adequate return for people. So what we need to continue to work on value for money, to continue to work on a good proposition from the player in the market to really offer value. And maybe in this sense, let me say that we also need the good supervision. This is maybe another panel, but it's sometimes what we see from Frankfurt is that the level of speed, adequacy, skills, especially on conduct supervision, is not the same in each and every country. And our effort to enhance the quality of the supervision is there, but takes time, and we need help, especially from the Commission in terms of maybe additional resources and budget. But as I said, this is part of another panel. I don't want to insist on this, but don't forget that a good regulatory framework needs to be accompanied by the good supervisory framework.
Okay. Thank you, Fausto. And I love that you put in this little ask to a list to the Commission. That's always good in public venues to frame your wish list, and it's good coming next to Christmas. And thank you for clearly spelling out that we need good products, we need good returns. We need to be pragmatic, not just thinking out of the blue sky. We need to be quite pragmatic in the details of what this product may mean, if it's brought on an EU level or if we first have to work nationally. So I'm going to go to Alwin, because of course you are working for a pension fund. You have a lot of experience. The Netherlands is it's actually at the top of the list of the Mercer Pension Fund Index in terms of a good pension system, even though it's undergone a whole revolution, let's say, recently in terms of its public pension schemes. But for you, what type of pension investment product should the EU policymakers introduce to really providing a significant contribution to this savings and investment union?
Yeah, thank you, Josina. So you're talking about a pension revolution in the Netherlands. So I can say that I'm part of that revolution, in the sense that there are 3 pension funds transferring to the new system as of January 1st. So that's in 6 weeks' time. And my pension is in one of those 3 pension funds. So I'm part of the start of the revolution. And talking about the investment products that people need, I think I would like to come back to your point of holistic. Because when you think of holistic, some people think, oh, that is really wide and kind of not clear what it is. But I think it is, because when you talk about holistic pensions, you want pensions that fit to the participants' needs. And so when you look at MiFID, and when you think about suitable investment products for individuals, it is clear that you really need to understand their preferences, and that means their risk preferences, but also their preferences regarding sustainability. But you also need to understand their risk-bearing capacity. And so the investment products that you develop need to fit to those needs. And I couldn't agree more with Jan's comments. When building this portfolio, it really has a lot of advantages in combining the power of all these individual investments in large portfolios. And first, I think that the topic of diversification is really important, and that's keeping diversified portfolios away from consumers means that they lack the access to worldwide capital markets. So I think that element is important, and not having enough savings that have an appetite for these investments is also holding Europe back in that respect. But I would like to emphasize that diversification goes one step further, and that is where when you build large portfolios, combining all these retail or individual portfolios, I should say, it also allows you access to private investments. And I think pension funds need scale in order to get access to these investments by building teams or having access to teams that are setting up these investments. And then I'm talking about examples like, for instance, the government pension fund in the Netherlands, ABP, is investing in large wind farms far out on the North Sea. And that's a billion project, which could not be possible if it were not for a large pension fund. And then that's a very large investment, but at the same time, it very well fits into a diversified portfolio if you have scale. So I think joining forces, I would say, really, really helps. And I think it is really, I'm very happy with the PEP, because that adds a layer of additional individual pensions to participants, but it's also important to have the capability to accumulate these investments into large portfolios. And so when there are no second pillar pensions or third pillar pensions, then PEP is an ideal addition. When also, for instance, in the Netherlands, when people do not have access to these collective portfolios, then it also makes sense to combine this. But I think there is one thing to look at. Is it really possible, looking at the investment composition of the product that is offered through these vehicles, do they provide access to these investments? And as you know, in the Netherlands now, the system is moving to a system where you have defined contributions, so fixed contributions for every person, young and old, in, but the outcome is still a DB-like outcome. It's focused on income, and there is, of course, volatility of the diversified portfolio that is having an impact on that income, but it is a smoother outcome. What is important to understand is that when you look at most individual products, it's really difficult to have this access to private investments in these portfolios. So they lack diversification. They have very nice life cycles, which are also in our collective pension products. So there's a similarity there, but they lack access to private investments. And the only example where that works is really Australia. And that is also because there is an emphasis on liquidity there. So basically, summing up, it is really important to develop pensions that are holistic, so really take into account what are the preferences and needs of the participants, and really give them access to what institutional investors can do, to the power of institutional investment, I would say. Yeah? Also building broad portfolios, including private investments. Yeah, and what pension funds do, and Dutch pension funds have a long experience in there, is to do that at very low cost. So with scale, and that also makes them attractive for employers, because that is the main channel, the main distribution channel. It's an efficient distribution channel. Because employers also like low pension costs, or good value for money, basically. So maybe I can stop there.
And I'm sure some of your points will be picked up by Tilman later. But I'm going to turn to Jan. So we mentioned the word holistic several times. We mentioned products fit for the right person. Making sure that the portfolio is interesting and that it's there's plenty of opportunities. Jan, what is your vision on this?
Thank you, Kramling. Now it works. Thank you, Kramling. First of all, congratulations to the whole finance team for publishing again. Really interesting report. And basically, what I found in that report is that finally they are trying to answer the question that is always asked, and especially by regulators, in many cases like us, and say that what are our needs in pension products? Okay, so this is the main question. Therefore, I'm doing lots of research. Therefore, we have built a original platform application, because lots of people are asking exactly the same question. Am I okay with these kind of products for the future? What's the question? But try to answer it. Because we are all different. So what are our needs? When I'm going to buy anything for that, of course I can choose it following my own preferences, but then you go out as a researcher and you see two different people. They have absolutely different products. And you show them, okay, you have chosen the product respecting your preferences, risk aversion, and so on and so on. And you can expect, let's say, €1 when you retire. Person next to you, also following his needs, but he has asked the right question. Why am I buying this product? To have adequate pension, meaning maximum possible pension. And now we have €2. The first person starts off, okay, but no, I don't want this kind of color, I want that kind. Okay, so who is storming the beats? Now we are starting to ask the question, what is the same product for retirement? It's not false. I'm really glad that EIOPA came out with this RTS competitive products for regulatory technical standard, because somehow they can form an indicator of safety. And it is a probability that you will beat with inflation for the whole period. Try to test again this simple formula. Try to test your pension products because honestly, more than 2/3 pension products will not have single safety. Okay, so how to proceed? Let's work with unified approach, not towards designing the product, but at least putting into regulation the right way. Okay, why should we allow the product to hit the market? What is the ultimate objective for the once we try to test it, I think the market will come out with a good product. And I think the best product, because it's more, it's proven techniques like cycling, testing stocks and later on.
Thank you very much, Jan, and that was some very pertinent remarks. Tilman, I'm going to turn to you. How can the EU pension product be designed to balance the risks and returns, incorporating features that are attractive to diverse market players, asset managers, distributors, and individual investors? So how do we, it cannot be one for all, but how do we go into that direction?
Good morning. Good morning. So I'm a bit like Jan, and I also question, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And I don't even have the benefit from being from the Hanseatic region. I'm from the south. So I'm just I'm the new person in this debate. So I look at things which the Commission has done in IORPS and in PEP, and I compare this what the Commission has done in other areas, which I have worked with, which is the securities markets or investment funds. And the one thing which does strike me is that as soon as you use the word pension, you get a multiplication of intermediaries and complexity compared to other things that I've been dealing with. And this is also why it's called savings union, because, or investment union, because somehow, and this is not criticism, this is just an observation, somehow when you look at investments, you have some very straightforward products. They're out there, they're index trackers, they are mirroring the economy, they're thematic trackers if you want a particular return profile. There are a lot of products out there which are really simple and very good returns if you hold them long enough and if you're not tempted to take out the earnings too early. And as soon as you then come to pensions, and it's totally different. We have intermediaries, we have product wrappers, we have IORPs who are in between the contributor and the investment that intermediate. So you first pay into the IORP, and then the IORP decides which fund manager to appoint, if they appoint a fund manager at all. They don't self-manage. So all of this, of course, comes at a price. And then you have something which I was not familiar with and which I'm still struggling a bit. You have guaranteed products. And well, if you go into the market, you need to be there long enough. You need to ride out different waves of the market if you're a young investor. But if you want to go into the market, there are probably no guarantees. And this is also why I think the Netherlands has moved from defined contributions to defined benefit to defined contributions. Because if you really want to be in the market, you will become wealthy over time if you sit it out long enough. But you won't have a guarantee that every single year your capital will be not diminished. It will increase, sometimes it will diminish, and over time you will get your return. But you won't have a yearly guarantee that everything is kind of at the same floor and it can just go up. And if you want to have a guarantee, it will cost you a lot of money because somebody will have to administer a very, very different portfolio as opposed to what they would have administered if they would just go into the market and let you ride the ups and downs of the market. And that is where the Netherlands are way ahead of the rest of Europe. And that is, of course, where the Americans are way ahead of the rest of Europe, because they understand that you don't look at this on an annual basis and did I get my capital and did it diminish or did it increase? But they look at this over the entire life cycle. And the life cycle products, again, that introduces complexity. If you want a life cycle product where you then have, you start with a very big equity exposure and over time you go towards bonds, somebody will have to administer that for you and somebody will charge you some fees for that. If you just go and buy these products, when you're young, you buy your ETFs. As you get older, you may wish to be a bit more conservative. If there was better financial education, people would realize by themselves how they would have to switch their investment strategy over time. You probably would have saved a lot of money, and you would have saved a lot of costs of intermediaries charging you lots of money. So that is my first conclusion. IORPs are a very good vehicle, as demonstrated in the Netherlands, to consolidate the pools, make the management more diverse, because if you have diversity, you again get over time a better return. And I think nobody promised that on a yearly basis. They all promise it over time. So IORPs are a good vehicle if they're really used to consolidate. If they're very fragmented, I'm not so sure that it's so great to have an IORP, because lots of little pools will go for an investment strategy which is not very diverse, which is not very promising in terms of return. And then my final observation on the PEP, or the PEP is conceptually a very good idea, and if it fills a gap in those countries where you do not have an occupational or a workplace pension, and where you have very underdeveloped private markets, the PEP is kind of maybe the vehicle to absorb this. What I would like to look at in the PEP in the next mandate is this a bit over-engineered? Is there too much constraints? Should we give the PEP operators a bit more freedom? Because the one PEP which we've seen, which seems to be very successful, has actually like the super simple investment strategy. So it's like basic PEP, if I understand correctly. So maybe we should just keep it at basic PEP.
Thank you very much, Tilman. So going into the differences, of course, you know, I work a lot with American colleagues, and sometimes in the debate on how can the EU build something like an US market, my US colleagues tend to forget that we're not a federation, and that we have rules at the EU level, but member states have a lot of influence because of tax policies, legislation protecting individuals, consumers, national economic pathways, etc., and cultural biases. So this doesn't facilitate this whole debate that we're having on pensions. Now, looking on the sort of fiscal and pension policy in the member states, Jan, I'm going to turn to you. You're obviously you've been working a lot with the whole Better Finance. What you produce yearly on pensions. You see all the differences in the member states. Can you highlight to us a little bit how we could overcome it? What pension could PEP really work harmoniously with all these different fiscal policies? Is that something that Tilman's unit could aim to work towards? What is your view?
Thank you. I have to use this microphone also for our online viewers to understand what we are talking about. Actually, okay, I have to admit that I'm the -- 1 PEP saver in Europe. I hold the first contract because I was able to be at the very beginning of the regulation of the idea. I was able to see the product when it was emerging. I was able to test it. I was able to, I received all the data. I was running all the tests behind it. I thought, wow, this one is okay. So I bought it. I'm the number one. I'm saving it because, of course, it has this kind of protection that I have to contribute because, I made a public statement. I will be the first one and I will show you that this product is great. So basically, I cannot touch it. So I'm contributing exactly how the RTS is written, exactly 100 euros monthly. Okay, of course, low fees. I fully understand the product. It's in my application. I understand everything behind it. Every single year, I'm able to see whether the projections put in the kit and promised to me when I was signing the contract, these pre-contractual projections, whether the development of my account still fits in these projections. I'm able to see it. What should I do? So it is okay. Okay. Then I was really happy. It works. So I started comparing the PEP product to national products, occupational or private. I said, wow, they are not performing good. This product is really great. And suddenly I found out, no, it's not. Why? Well, because national jurisdictions, we will tax it. You will pay social insurance on the contributions. Oh, suddenly 65% down. Okay, so do we really want this? Destroy, future savings of the people only because of the taxes? When you were reading between the lines, all these kind of statements of national tax officials, they said, no, we don't want this kind of EU product, intriguing into our national systems. We will tax it, we will push it out. This is true. This is really true. So our question as a savers is, do you really want to help us? If yes, please do the fair, our level playing field, or treat it exactly like your national product. If it's a good product, it will find a way. If it's a bad product, no one will buy it. So this is my recommendation. Lots of countries do not treat the PEP or this, let's say, EU, our baby, EU baby, the same way how they treat their national products. Even if those national products are not of good design and they are not able to keep the promise, they will not bring you adequate pension. Thank you.
So Jan, you've launched a great challenge. Tilman is sitting right next to you and listening. But Tilman's, what can he do regarding tax? And that, of course, is the eternal question. It's something that I remember when we had the discussions on withholding tax. The tax has been sort of white elephant in the room, and hopefully now with the new commission and this renewed focus also on, I think there's one on green. I'm getting a double. This renewed focus on linking the savings and investment union to the economy, we're going to be addressing the tax issue because it has to be addressed. Otherwise, we've had this problem on tax, national tax biases with LTIFs. It's not new. It keeps on coming up. Whenever the EU has a great product, this national somehow comes back in and, it gets taxed. So we do need to address it. I'm going to turn a little bit away from the EU, some of the challenges. Yeah, of course you can. Go ahead, please.
Baby boomer generation doesn't know how to use online applications at all. No, I want to react to Jan on PEP and tax because this is why I was already being a bit more modulated in my response. If you are in a member state who has, let's take the Netherlands, which has a huge workplace pension scheme, you will probably not get a lot of people interested in a private pension on top of that because they have these hugely successful funds. If you are in Sweden even, where you have actually under first pillar, an equity-based pension scheme, you will probably also not got that much buy-in into yet another supplementary pension product based on equity funds. But if you are in a member state which neither has a well-functioning workplace pension, nor has a highly developed market for private pension, the PEP is actually a solution. So you don't actually, Jan, I'm slightly being a bit optimistic here, more optimistic because it's our work program. You don't have to convince a country like the Netherlands or a country which has still a huge pay-as-you-go and people cannot make the pension contribution 3 times over. You know, there's a limited budget you have. You don't need to convince necessarily those big countries to give the PEP the tax advantage. You will already get scale and heft if you convince those countries which actually want to build up a third pillar, those countries who do not have workplace schemes, that they would just get together as a sort of enhanced cooperation group, and they would give that tax advantage because they have an interest in doing so. And I'm sure, because the PEP that you're talking about, where you are the anchor investor, if I may put it like this, that one is already distributed in 3 other member states who seem to have the same problem as the home country of the PEP. So if these countries get together and say, we give it a tax advantage because it doesn't cannibalize some existing system, it doesn't take money out of the pay-as-you-go pot, you already get a significant heft. And I think that is what we should be working on. We should be working with those member states as a group.
I thought that was a really valid comment, Tilman, because you cannot, at the moment, you know, and this is to that point that we're not a federation. I mean, remember that the US, I think, took about 150 years to develop a true capital market, and there is still local differences, also tax, by the way. So I think building, you know, in countries that really need the PEP because their local systems are not, is a good, you know, then you get the mass building and you actually, it becomes a wave, and hopefully then it moves across the EU. But I want to dig a little bit more into sort of asset allocation strategies and really looking at this how that can be, you know, how we can link and make it more attractive to increase the returns and to also build towards the retirement goals that individuals will have. And Alwin, I'm going to turn to you on this. So how could we tailor the life cycle approach in an ideal asset allocation strategy, and how diversified? And, you know, this is, again, maybe you could link it to that, you know, this, we're trying to build the savings and investment union and encouraging this wider view and this, you know, increasing use of different assets.
I think that the life cycle approach to investing is well accepted all across Europe. It's clear that young participants mostly can afford a higher risk budget, and that older participants closer to retirement like to kind of build down, take out risk. So, and this life cycle methodology has always been kind of the basic building block in DB funds, so large collective funds, in the sense that basically these life cycles of all participants were kind of summed up to one allocation. And basically what you see in the PEP, you have this life cycle on an individual basis, and also in the new Dutch pension system, you also have this life cycle applied to cohorts, so more age dependency. And that means that you can also, like in individual pension products or more collective type DC products, you can develop specific portfolios for these cohorts. And of course, it's very important to diversify. Diversification is really diversification within the bonds area, to corporate bonds, to emerging markets, but also on the equity side, also to emerging markets, diversification worldwide. But I think there's also a specific challenge, as I mentioned, in the alternative space. So real estate really has been part of the portfolios, and I think real estate very well fit pension accounts. Also also PEPs and life cycles. But I think I would take it one step further also to look at infrastructure, look at private equity companies. I mean, if you only look at public markets, you can only address part of investable assets. So you also want to look at these assets. And I think there is a particular challenge also given the ambitious European agenda on sustainable investments. I think there is a particular challenge to also bring yourself in a position that you're able to develop these investments. And I think in the private investment space, there are much more opportunities to do this at scale, which is also relevant for this sustainable investment agenda. And I very much agree, Tilman, to your comment. In creating the opportunity for individuals to kind of participate in these systems, I think the delivery mechanism should be fit for purpose. So I think that what you mentioned, that scale is really important, and that it also, given the differences between countries, you can differentiate. But I think that the design principles are really very, very similar. And so we can learn from each other.
You want to come in? Yeah, do.
Not to hijack the panel, but
I know.
that's what I usually do.
I won't let you.
It's very important what you just said in terms of access to the private markets, and you're going to have a panel later on this. There is, of course, an issue with a lot of innovation, startups and scale-ups happening in Europe, who then do not have an exit strategy into the public markets in the European Union itself. And that is, I think, a huge problem. And I did securities markets for 9 years, and maybe that's a mea culpa, maybe we failed, but we have not yet created an infrastructure in the European Union, a domestic infrastructure, domestic in terms of the union, which can actually absorb all the startup and scale up that we are able to produce in the union. So we're not short on innovation. We're not short on entrepreneurs. We're not short even on the scale up phase. We have the European Investment Bank having a huge portfolio, thousands of companies, but they cannot exit the portfolio because there's no infrastructure to accommodate this. And what do? They sell it on to American pension funds, or they go and list in the United States. And this is, I think, an issue where the Dutch are doing the right thing. They're saying, okay, fine, we don't have this infrastructure, but at least we can access this huge potential via a sort of private equity strategy. So at least if you then package it and then give it back to the investors as part of this package, they get an indirect access to this dormant huge area, because this area has a very hard time getting into the public markets because the public markets are not equipped. And I would invite you to ask the representatives of those associations which represent the public markets, what are they going to do about this absorption capacity?
And that brings me very nicely to Fausto now. Tilman, you mentioned the dormant, market, and I think that that's an important word. How can you, Fausto, at the EU level, encourage increasing investment in pension products that effectively address the sustainability risks? We're talking now, we're into the green planet.
Yeah, we are not yet maybe green, so such a great planet, but we have the ambition to do more and more, of course. And the rule that were put in place at European level are helping. But let's be frank, we sometimes, when we want to really hurry up in achieving an objective, we may risk, and this is the case in our sustainability agenda, to put too many things together in place at a different speed, sometimes with some complexity that then we need to readdress. And I'm referring to the fact that as us, we provided an opinion to the Commission to simplify a bit the SFDR, the regulation on how to disclose the sustainability feature of the product on the market available for people. Why? Because consumer testing are telling us that simply citizens don't understand key terms of our sustainability agenda, of our sustainability product, no? Taxonomy aligned products, a sustainable product, Article 8, Article 9 are being used by the market provider as sort of labeling, but what we understand is that simply people is too complex. They don't get it. And so we need to simplify. Our proposal was to revise the SFDR and to have two simplified. We have two category, transition and sustainable product, and with better clarification, eliminating the inconsistency between different pieces of regulation. And this should help people to better understand. Why? Because I think that there is a wish from people to invest more and more sustainable. Our Eurobarometer research that we perform every year tell us that there is an increased interest, but there is, as I said already, an increased skepticism on the clarity of what is a product which is sustainable and which is and or not. Now, 44% of people said we don't understand this terminology. So we need to simplify. But also what we recommend is that before any level 1, any level 2 being put in place, there is a need to make some consumer tests. Sometimes our, let's say, the life cycle of our low production is done on the basis of some research, but then things change during the negotiation. At the end, the final piece of legislation that is out there is not consumer tested. And this then is difficult to recuperate in the level 2 or in the implementation. So maybe sometimes we need to be a bit slower and make more analysis on what is needed in terms of people. Then there is another area where Tilman already mentioned the EIOPA directive. We provided advice. There is a need anyway to adjust the EIOPA directive also under the perspective of the sustainability, because for the moment, differently from the insurance sector, the EIOPA are only voluntarily, let's say, so they are not mandatory requirement to measure the impact of their investment strategy on the sustainability factor out there. They are, of course, as the other sector, obliged to measure the risk coming in from the investment, but no mandatory assessment of their investment strategy impact on the planet. This is something that we can better, let's say, settle in the review of the EIOPA directive, which I think will come soon. And in this area, maybe also preferences of member, if we are clear on what they understand of the different product, needs to be taken into account, because people want to invest more sustainable. If I can, just one point on the life cycle on guarantee and what was said around the simplification or simplicity of the product. What I remember is also that there were research that people want to have safe investment. They care about the guaranteed product. For me, the problem is not so much if you offer a guarantee or if you offer a life cycle strategy that in any case, what is important for a pension product is that it's not subject to the volatility of the market. Because it happened already in the past in Italy. I remember, it was young, there was a crisis, a lot of contribution simply because of the market fall down, they were lost. People cannot afford to suffer capital market volatility at the moment of the. So I'm happy that there are different products around in the market, but people for retirement needs, they need to be helped. I don't think it's enough financial education. I think they need to be helped. The product out there that are for pension needs need to satisfy the pension needs. And that's why maybe when I speak about saving and investment union, I said that we need to first consider the need of people. And of course, the costs are there. Tilman is perfectly right. If you want somebody to administer your guaranteed product, it's costly. I know, we know. We should be clear and we should work on diminishing the level of this cost. But I also don't think that it's enough to say, okay, help yourself, do your choices, because people, for having a level of literacy, of knowledge, of understanding, years are needed. And in my view, as a supervisor, as a regulator, as a policymaker, we need to be sure that the products that are there offered for pension needs are adequate for the pension needs of people. Simply.
Alwin, you want to comment on that?
Maybe. I think what people want is stable outcomes. And of course, in all these changing times, stability is difficult. But guarantees are very costly and will really force you, also given the whole set of regulations that we have, into bonds. And so you will have the guarantee of a low pension. And therefore, I would say that what you would like to create is stable pensions. I agree on that. We did surveys also on self-employed, what they want. They want a guaranteed pension. But then we explained what the benefit would be of this diversified portfolio. And then they said, oh, give me the diversified portfolio. That's actually your story, Jan. And therefore, I think that the design of the pension product matters in large collectives. So therefore, in the Dutch system, we moved from a kind of hybrid DB to a hybrid DC. I think one element, and so pension funds could choose between a more kind of risk sharing option of this new contract or a somewhat more pure DC type, but both with an annuity as an outcome. So, but what we see is that most pension funds choose this more risk-sharing type of contract, and the reason is that that contract offers more opportunity for stabilizing outcomes. And so our expectations in the Netherlands, although we do not have guarantees, actually we did not have guarantees. We had conditional guarantees on the financial situation in the fund. So what we see is pension funds choose for this contract with risk sharing. And the huge benefit is that it also allows these large portfolios better that are really diversified. And it is indeed difficult for people to make these choices around the product. So there is help in making people make some choices regarding the actual outcome. So there is some choice in the type of income that they want. High first and then later on lower or something else. So that would be my comment on guarantees.
So this, of course, is the heart of the question: how to ensure, the stability in a way, let's say, in brackets, and have that outcome that you want, security, and as Fausto said correctly, supervisor, you need to get that consumer to feel safe. But how do you then go and say, you don't want enormous deduction of the return because of that. So how do you manage this? And I think, Tilman, for you, I see a big challenge in what's to be done at level 1, level 2, and level 3. Because I think this is always, the issue. Do you put into the first level a lot of details on portfolio diversification, on safety, on guarantees? Do you leave it lower down? How do you build this? And I think specifically, of course, we've been discussing on giving more choice, and you refer to that issue. How do we get, for investors and pension holders in the EU, where we have a lot of entrepreneurs, we have a lot of new things. How can they get into that market? All of this, we're playing with so many moving targets, but how do we ensure that the EU can correctly come in on that portfolio diversification issue and building more opportunities and creating more fluid markets?
Obviously, their background and what they've been doing previously in life. So obviously I would agree that diversification is a better strategy to smoothen what investors apparently don't like, at least a lot of them don't like, which is called volatility. They call it risk, by the way. So obviously, if you say volatility is risk, nobody's going to invest in anything. So maybe let's call it volatility for once. It just goes up and down. That is what the market is like, and there is some educational need to explain that. But you can smoothen the volatility not by having sort of expensive capital reserves and all kinds of pockets which you set aside in, or having a very conservative investment strategy, just to basically invest in fixed income. There are many ways to achieve stability, and I think I agree with the analysis. There is a way, if you're diligent, to achieve a sort of stability, accepting some volatility at a relatively good return level, as opposed to achieving the same thing as a return level where inflation and cost will eat the rest of your benefit. So if you want in the European Union to have private investors, pension investors, to go more into capital markets, you will have to explain that phenomenon. Otherwise, we have the following phenomenon that you will get, let's say, if you're lucky, 1% return in a very conservative portfolio. We say, oh, but you can sort of go into the capital markets, you could possibly get 4% return. But because we need to give you so many guarantees in order for you to get the 4% return, we will have a very costly structure, which will cost you 3%. And then at the end, you come out again with 1% return because you had a very expensive product to guarantee. So I think we need to see it over time. And in my analysis, there's one gap, I admit that. If you start as a pension savers relatively late in life, that is actually a problem. So if you want this diversification strategy, you need to start also very early. So for some people in Europe, and that is what I don't know what to do about it, but for some people, there will be a gap. If the 20 years old start now to invest in this very diverse portfolio, they can sit this out because they will have a very long time horizon. If you only start when you're in your mid-40s and in your 50s because you suddenly realize this, as Fausto explained, there is a different target market where maybe this very diversified but slightly more volatile strategy doesn't work. So what can we do about this? Because your question was, as legislators, I think a good example, I love this product because it's basically an investment template codified is the UCITS. And then for the more illiquid people, it's the LTIF, which has recently been much more successful than initially. So there is a certain merit. I know this is like super controversial and those who love the Lamfalussy process will not like it that much, but there is some merit in actually getting a lot of the details right at the level 1. And the UCITS fund is a good example. Most of the fundamental principles and even the use of derivatives and all these strategies are actually in the level 1. And then there is less risk that it becomes overly complex at level 2, because you have to be, in my view at least, somewhat diligent and sparing with all the empowerments and mandates to specify, because these are usually a sign of weakness. You couldn't actually agree at the principal legislative level. So you park the problem. Solvency II, by the way, is a good example for that, my new challenge, and then give it to level 2. And at level 2, you then again don't really want to solve the problem because you know why they didn't solve it at level 1. So why should we be solving it at level 2? And then you get all this complexity with all these rules and the exception and the counter exception and the cap on the counter exception. And then good luck if anybody still understands what this is all about. But it's basically just to sort of plaster over the fact that nobody really agrees on what the strategy is. And then you have all this fine tuning. And that is very dangerous because then you say Europe is drowning in red tape, and that's probably then true. So I am in favor, I say this, if you want to have efficient legislation, you have to get the basic parameters at level 1. If you can't agree, then you'll just have to, as Fausto says, get some expertise and negotiate a bit longer.
Thank you, Tilman, and that is clear, and I think it was great you were so clear on where you will be going in the next legislation. I want to turn, I'm conscious of time, and I'm conscious also that I do want to give the floor for questions, but I want quickly to go to EIOPA's PEP paper. We have talked a little bit about it, but maybe Fausto, you can go a little bit more into your paper and how to make PEP attractive at the same time for providers and keeping it low cost, the eternal question.
Yeah, as you said, a lot has been said already by all of us. First, the tax treatment. Let me remind that Commission already strongly recommended to ensure the same treatment of the national product. Now the problem is how to enforce this recommendation that came to the past. I very much agree with Tilman. Different member states at different level. Maybe we need to force more on some rather than others. But in theory, the principle is already there. It's just a question of respecting the recommendation of the Commission. So it's our, let's say, our member state that need to perform, in my view, a bit better. But then the product itself is still valid. The idea behind it, I'm happy to hear that there is already a good agreement that the idea is already there, the product is there, the basic features are still, let's say, remain in their validity. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. That's my major concern when I hear a lot of talks about saving and investment union. There is a product that is already there. We wanted to highlight the need to change, and this is very much in line with what we heard today, simplification. There is maybe a need to simplify a bit, make mandatory, make voluntary the sub-account, because the PEP was, we had in mind this portability, mobile workers, but actually it can work even, and so it's mandatory to set up sub-account for different. This is an area where we can simplify so that we can also have, let's say, national, let me say so, PEP, if they respect some qualification. We need to maybe also facilitate the transfer of money from current product into a PEP if there is a new system in place. We need to revise a bit this idea of the value for money, the cost. The answer to reduce cost from the legislation was a 1% cap on cost. Now, this we see that is not maybe achieving the result. No, maybe we did not achieve the result we wanted because there is only one provider, which shows that it's possible. It's possible. So it shows clearly to us that it's not only a question of cost cap. And there are providers that tells us, no, in the end, it can work, but only after the initial phase. At the beginning, it's difficult. Some other that say that's not really the problem, is more the tax treatment. In our view, we can revise the concept of the cap. But of course, in replacement of this, there should be a strong narrative on value for money, the same that we are already putting forward for all the other products in our remit, insurance and pension. And happy that the Commission and the RIS now is also using the same sort of similar concept. So there is a need to have anyway under control the cost of this product vis-a-vis the target market, the feature of the different product. For the rest, we spoke about guarantee or life cycle. The PEP already has the answer, no? You choose if you prefer this or that. And I'm very much agree with the Tilman. If there is a young PEP, maybe we can agree that we should be sort of mandatorily opening a PEP when you are 18 years old as European, so that you start the beginning, saving a bit. Under our idea initially was 100 per month, as you are doing. But even at least we prepare a future generation. And then, as we said, the different target market cohort are different, so we need to diversify the different answers. Then the other idea to also simplify a bit the current structure is to open it also for the occupational pension, because now it's basically a personal pension, but why not enlarging the scope of application of PEP can also help provider being more and more interested. This is basically the idea behind it. What we want to do now on the basis of this 10 pages document to engage with all the stakeholders. We already started in our stakeholder group to had other idea on how to make it fly and prepare our help for the commission to take the final decision when in 2027, if I remember correctly, there is a mandatory review clause that we need to work. So our work will become much earlier, of course. This is the idea. Basically, the product is there, is not, is valid. The idea behind it is valid. We need to refine it a bit. Let's use the current legislation instead of reinventing something from the scratch.
Don't go ahead. Yeah.
The argument that the product is already there, you could take this, and I'm not trying to knock the PEP, but you could take this further. The product, a retail savings product, was already there. We had UCITS funds since 1991. The products are there. It's just that people don't use them as a retirement savings product, but they use them as a long-term savings product. All you need to do is invest in an ETF, hold it for 40 years, and then you get your payout. I mean, what is the sort of big mystery that pension products are so special and so different? It is true, you need to start when you're young, and this is what where we have some sort of gap to bridge. But this argument that we don't have the adequate products, I personally, as a human being, not as a representative of any institution, I don't get the point that we always say the product is missing. We have very well regulated, harmonized products which can be bought and sold across the European Union. Anybody can subscribe to them. And they, if you use them in a certain way, if you had good advice, so this brings me to the retail investment strategy. If you had good advice at the point of sale and people explain to you, the wealth advisors and the advisors, this is a good product, but you have to have certain behavior in holding it, we would get that result at a much cheaper cost than designing yet another layer of regulated products within pay-in schedules and pay-out schedules. And so I'm not knocking the PEP. We'll continue with the PEP. I'm also saying that the tax treatment and the compartments, I agree with Fausto, we can, if you have a group of member states who think that for their retirement needs, the PEP is a good solution. And if they get together and give it a tax treatment, we don't really care that maybe some others who don't need the PEP do not follow the Commission recommendation. Because when Fausto said that people are, what did you say, that people are not complying with the Commission's recommendation, well, that was already a contradiction in terms, because it is a recommendation, so you don't have to comply with it. But if you actually see a point in using it because you have a specific problem in your member state and you get together and in this enhanced group, you then think the recommendation is actually okay, so you're going to do it, that already brings us forward.
Thank you, Tilman. And I was reminded by Arnaud that we're bypassing already the end limit of things, but I want to give the opportunity to both Jan and Alwin to come in very quickly on what Fausto and Tilman have said, if you want.
So I think that the staff paper really helps in putting it on the agenda. But what I like about PEP is that it remains simple and straightforward, so that it's also easy to communicate, Tilman, a bit like what you said about the basic PEP. And so that you can see it as a modular addition to either the first pillar or to the first and second pillar, or for those who do not participate. And maybe a remark, when I look at new Dutch IORPs, and that the youngest ones that basically offer PEP-like products to kind of startups, smaller companies, etc., outside other supplementary industry funds. What I see is really very efficient solutions being offered in the range of 30 to 50 basis points. So that's half the cap, a bit lower than half the cap. So I think that's definitely possible. And these schemes are really successful. They have seen double-digit assets under management growth for a decade. So, and are a relevant part in the Dutch pension system. So, but from a communication point of view, I think that leaving the cap out would not be so nice, because it looks a bit like costs can rise. And I think when I'm looking at the large collective funds that also hold large private investments, I mean, typically cost levels between 20 and 50, 60 basis points are really possible. So 100 basis points is really far away in that sense for us.
Yeah, Tilman, go ahead.
No, because this is, I think, a valid point. If you use the PEP as an IORP, it's probably pretty easy to comply with the cap because you don't have distribution costs. Very simple. Where the inflation comes in is when you distribute the PEP, and then every distributor in is like, yeah, okay, well, you have to pay me. And I saw some statistics, you have to pay me 0.89. So you have already 89 basis points that you have to give to your distributor. And then you have, of course, a very small margin still left, how you cover your own costs. So I don't know how they solved this in your miracle product and how they got around the distribution cost. Or maybe there was a willing distributor. But so I also, to be quite honest, as somebody being marked by the risk, I have also a certain residual sympathy for that cap. It's a bit blunt, but it kind of means don't pay your distributor all the money. Find some sort of basic and very simple way of direct distribution. Address your clients directly, because you will be able to comply with that cap relatively easily.
Thank you. And very shortly, from you, and then we'll have a couple of questions, I hope, if I'm allowed.
Thank you. Well, I really love this open and transparent discussion. So let's say it right. What's the problem? We have perfect products on the market. The problem is how they are used, either sold or presented to an end user for what kind of needs this product is okay. So let's switch the paradigm. Let's put in the regulation what kind of question in which order should be answered to the client before you offer any kind of product. Let's put in the regulation that if you are 50 years old and you want to buy a pension product, the first question would be, how much do you have in your pot saved? How much you want to get at the very end, let's say in 15 years, and then I provide you with a suitable product. Let's, yeah, of course, but at this moment, exactly at this moment, we are asking savers, when selling a product, let's say saving product, we are asking the question, like, what kind of volatility would you like? What is your risk profile? It's like, okay, let's talk about what kind of seat in a plane you would like to prefer, but you have never asked the question, where do you want to fly? So let's ask the right question. Let's put in the regulation. This is the question you need to discuss with your clients first. Would you like to have saved with your 100 euros monthly for 40 years, 100,000 or 200,000? You get a clear answer, 200,000. Okay, now we are talking about equity-based usage funds, PEPs, and so on and so on. Not vice versa. So that would be my answer.
And so we come back to financial literacy and financial advisors, their role and how they need to play it. I'm going to give, am I allowed one question, two questions? Okay, one and two, sorry, that was it. Okay, go ahead.
As was mentioned, sorry, on the topic of consumer testing, as was mentioned, and generations X and Z, I think it's difficult. The biggest question is how to paint a prospect that there will be golden years on this planet. If you're going to retire, let's say in 2060, and you would be expecting to draw down your pension for the succeeding decades, much bigger questions about the state of our planet come up in the minds of people who would be making saving sacrifices until then. And the questions are, will our economy continue to deliver the types of returns talked about? Is diversification enough to achieve that? Or do we need a much more drastic approach where pension funds are allies in building up the new economy, such as you mentioned, the Dutch pension funds are doing, Are they allies in helping to transform the economy and get out from under the climate risks? And many financial professionals, such as the actuaries professional body in the UK, are putting out risk alerts on these topics. The Potsdam Institute, the Network for Greening the Financial System. And even if the Generation X and Z people aren't reading those as much as some people in this room, how do we actually paint a picture that is worth saving for the next 20, 30, 40 years when the climate situation is so drastic? I don't think that and nor do these professional bodies think that the stress tests currently done are looking at the downside risks effectively. So I think this is a challenge, a communications challenge, and a bigger challenge for the pension system to communicate. And I'd love your responses.
Now allow for the second question, and then we'll go to the panel to answer. If you, yeah.
Thanks a lot. My name is Wolfgang, and I represent German Public Insurance here in Brussels. My question would be, how can we maybe make more use of the results and findings of behavioral finance research there? I think Tilman has alluded it quite nicely. A well-diversified long-term portfolio would do the trick for most pension savers. However, we know from behavioral finance that people have a very large loss aversion. So seeing the portfolio drop in 1 year is very hard for them, even they had nice returns the years before. So that is also why, I mean, no matter how well you explain, it would be better to do this and that. A lot of savers just demand guarantee products, which in the end might not perform as they could.
Okay, so Alwin, you
maybe to respond on the first question. I think that's really a very important question, since offering a solution that caters to young participants is really affect your license to operate, basically. And when you're looking at young participants, they sometimes have different preferences. But what strikes me is that they also emphasize the relevance of sustainable investing. And sometimes they have different topics that they want to address. And given for one example is given all the housing issues in many European cities and towns, investing in affordable housing is really an important topic in this area. So, and that's also a reason why pension funds take note of that. Another example is really the energy transition. So that's the reason, and also thinking about startups, that investing in this type of investments, also in smaller startups, is really relevant for this group.
now Fausto, Tilman, Fausto, would you?
But no, just one consideration on this aspect, and then on the other point, which is I already touched upon a bit. On this aspect, I mean, for me, we need to be a bit also optimistic, and let's be honest. We know we are living terrible period. Yesterday we had our board meeting, and the closest session was so depressing because in the end, I know that with geopolitical risk, okay, but we need to work and also have a bit of optimism. I very much concur what you said in terms of concrete answer to the younger generation. But from our side, I also believe that we have the energy to resist. Second, on the point, I already mentioned it a bit. The PEP is the answer because, as I said, there is a guaranteed option and a life cycle option, but both are satisfying the pension needs. This is maybe the difference between now what I understand from Tilman, and I think that the question is correct. Behavioral science tell us that people don't wait 40 years, simply. And we need to take account of what concretely the people behavior is when thinking about designing a product for the pension needs. Otherwise, we simply miss the target because you are perfectly right. But then in the end, people withdraw their money when there is a minus on the performance side, and we don't help society. As regulators, I think this is a responsibility. That's why I was referring consumer testing, behavioral approach when it comes to this. Still cost under control. That is super clear to us. That's why we started, even without so much strong legal basis in the IDD, our work on value for money, because otherwise we can miss the opportunity. And I stop here.
Yes, I'm also an optimist, and that's why the one point where I diverge from Fausto is that I'm an optimist. So if there is a minus, that's precisely when I invest, because it can only get better. That's the whole point about equity. You invest when there is a minus, and that is why the scheme that you refer to works so well, because you set aside your 100 euros and you invest if it's up, if it's down. And statistically, what I read is that if you do that, you're going to have a huge return because you're more likely to invest if you do this regular investing when the market is actually down. So you get the upside. So I agree with Fausto on the optimism. I disagree on the fact that immediately when it's slightly downwards, you need to withdraw all of your money. Actually, actually, I'm saying you should put in even more. Yes, but I mean, it's a simple thing. You just need to show them that thing. If I can understand it, I'm not very mathematically inclined. If I can understand this thing, I think most people will ultimately understand it because I'm in the lower, what do you call it, percentile in your language of the population when it comes to math skills. So I took the test, so it's clear. Now, I have to also say that if you think that everything is doomed anyway, indeed, saving for pension is maybe not your biggest concern because you say the world is coming to an end and all the climate thing. Okay, fine. That is way above my pay scale to address this segment of the population and what to do about their investment strategy. But I think that diverse portfolios investing in startup companies in technologies which will avoid the doomsday scenario is actually the way forward. And that is why the private market will become more important. And we had in FISMA, we have always, I did alternative investment funds under Charlie McCreevy. Anybody remember Charlie McCreevy? Eternal optimist as well. And we regulated alternative investment funds, but not with the aim that this is a really bad industry, just with the aim to give some minimum guarantees so that more people could access also the alternative asset classes. I am greenwashing history a bit. That was not really how AFMT started, but that's how we interpret it nowadays. And I think it's important that asset managers and pension fund managers actually enlarge their scope and look at these kind of companies who avoid the doomsday scenario. And that is where Europe has a big problem because we have stock markets and stock indices which reflect the last century. And none of them are innovating and none of them are saving the planet. And if you look at other stock exchanges, not to always cite America, you can also look in Asia, there is an increasing number of companies on there. And I'm not talking about artificial intelligence because they burn a lot of energy and they are contributing to the doomsday scenario. But there are a lot of companies, green tech, on the listed markets, which actually are working towards avoiding the doomsday scenario. And that is where Europe has to work, that this is not just a niche in the private equity portfolio of a big asset manager or a big pension fund manager like Alwin, but that this is a mainstay also of our exchanges. And you come to the next panel and you can remind them that I said this.
Good. And with that, we hand over for the next panel. I thank my panelists very much. It was very frank, open, entertaining, and please join me in thanking them.